This video is dealing with Act 2, Scene 3 of Macbeth, looking at it in detail through particularly three key moments in it. This is the scene in which Duncan's death is discovered by everyone apart from Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, and we get to see the differing reactions, particularly of Macduff himself, who of course is introduced for the first time in this scene, of Banquo, of Duncan's sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, and the faked reaction of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. Scene begins with the porter answering the door of the castle to Macduff and Lennox, who've come to meet with Duncan. I don't think you have to worry too much about that bit there. This is AQA, not Edexcel. Then Macbeth shows Macduff to Duncan's chambers. He uncovers the murder. They sound alarms, wakes everybody up. Who's there? Macbeth then comes in having killed the guards and explains why, or attempts to explain why. Macduff wants to know why, questions him. Macbeth, during his explanation, which tends to go on a little bit, and makes him look a little bit suspicious, Lady Macbeth faints to basically shut him up. Led by Banquo, who shows quite substantial leadership skills in this scene, the lords swear to investigate the murders. Meanwhile, fearing for their lives, Malcolm decides to go to England and Donalbain decides to go to Ireland. As I say, it's a very chaotic scene. It starts with this strange thing with the porter, which is really, mostly, I think it's a practical thing because Macbeth has to show his, has to go away and get the blood and everything washed off him and changed before he can come back out again. So it's a little bit practical in that way. It allows them to introduce Macduff, and it's a little kind of almost like a stand-up comic routine, a porter scene, dealing with some of the issues surrounding particularly the idea of equivocation and Father Garnet, and who, I won't go into who he is and what that is at this point. I'm going to start thinking about the big issues that might come up. So if we take the big issues as we identify them generally here, okay, the two main characters, their relationship, supernatural, ambition, loyalty, gender. Then Macbeth is definitely significant in this scene because of his reactions, behaviour. Lady Macbeth as well, because even though she's very briefly in this, we see once again her ability to deal with Macbeth. Their relationship less so, but there are aspects of the supernatural particularly in Angus's reports of the strange events that have been happening. Ambition and loyalty are always going on in the background here, and particularly in some of Banquo's reactions to find things out, and also to a large degree in the decisions that Malcolm makes when he realises what's going on. Now, although it is, as with most of it dealing with masculinity, it's not the main thing here, and it's not really at this point about kingship apart from the loyalty that people show to Duncan. Okay, so let's start our first key moment with the bit where Macduff has gone to wake up Duncan. Of course, he's not going to be able to. So just leading up to that, we have, first of all, Lennox retelling a number of strange events that have happened that night before Macduff comes in with the horror of what he has discovered. So we start with this speech by Lennox, which is a number of things. It is paired with Ross and the old man at the end of this act when they exchange stories about all the strange things that have been going on. This is particularly focused on this night, and of course this is a night in which Duncan has been murdered. They don't know this yet. So Lennox is not applying it to the knowledge of what's gone on, because he doesn't know what's gone on. But it does possibly suggest as well the impact of the supernatural. Was the supernatural running wild that night? Was it celebrating its success? Well, what do we get? We get a storm, an unruly night that blew chimneys down. We get strange sounds. We hear those quite a bit. Macbeth's already just heard some in the previous scene. Lamenting, screams of death, prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events. The obscure bird the owl, that is, clamouring the livelong night, and the owl appears a few times. It appeared at the beginning of the last scene when Lady Macbeth heard it hooting, an omen of death for many people, a bird of death for many. And then this idea of an earthquake, essentially a sense that either this is the supernatural going around causing chaos, or this is the reaction of nature and the earth to the unnatural events that are happening, or a mixture of both. But it's quite a significant thing in suggesting to us that there is more going on outside Macbeth's head. This is not something that just Macbeth or Lady Macbeth are seeing or witnessing or experiencing. So it does bring in the supernatural beyond those two. And then we get Macduff coming back in, and his language. Macduff is not a particularly three-dimensional character. He's really there to serve the purpose as a revenger in the end, but he's also the skeptic. He will be the first to doubt what's going on with Macbeth, and we have seen it just before this, him exchange a few pleasantries with Macbeth that seem to suggest that they're perfectly good friends at this point and perfectly get on well. But here we see the extent of his feelings, and I suppose this will therefore, because Macduff and Macbeth are of course are a contrasting pair, will contrast their feelings about the awfulness of what's gone on. I mean, Macbeth obviously did feel it was awful, and that's what made him struggle so much. But Macduff, you cannot see anything beyond the genuineness of what he's saying here. Now, horror, horror, horror. Once again, we get the three, the pattern of repeating it 3 times, which you can make what you want of. And this, again, this idea of tongue nor heart, which comes up a lot, head and heart, and, speech and heart, what's beneath. Neither can actually say what's going on. And it's interesting, Macduff does not come out and say what it is for a while. He's much rather say, confusion now hath made his masterpiece. So he focuses in on the aspect of chaos. This is the masterpiece of chaos. Macduff recognises the situation for what it is at that time. So what we have to ask ourselves about this key moment is, what's the significance of these strange events? What does it contribute to the meaning here? But also at the same time, even though it's not his first words, this is probably the first time we really get to experience Macduff's character. How is he being established to us? What's the purpose here? If we move on to the second key moment I've identified, this is Macbeth's reaction to being quizzed about killing them. Now, it is departing from the plan, and there's no doubt Lady Macbeth will probably be quite confused as to why he's done this. And of course, maybe we are. Why not stick with the plan? Lady Macbeth clearly wasn't worried about the fact that they would lie and say they didn't do things. Maybe Macbeth was worried the fact that they were drinking with Lady Macbeth before. Well, anyway, this is what he does. And the key response is Macduff's. Why did you? Why did you do that? Now, we can imagine everybody else's reactions around, but Macduff is the one who quizzes him straight away. And I think this is the beginning of Macduff's doubts. The next thing we'll see from Macduff, after, again, him carrying on agreeing with others in the scene what's to do, will be his refusal to go to Macbeth's coronation, and speaking in terms that suggest he's suspicious of him already. And I do think at this point that's where this is heading towards. Macduff has not had any reason to suspect Macbeth at this point, or to feel any badness towards him, anything negative towards him. Now he does. Now, of course, Macbeth goes off on one, as we've said. Not a phrase I'd suggest you use in an essay, that, going off on one, but he can't shut up, basically. He's trying to justify himself and dig himself into a corner. And this phrase, here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gash stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. It's maybe a little bit too poetic, maybe a little bit too carefully constructed, probably therefore showing the insincerity, the balance of his silver skin and his golden blood is a little bit too much. It's a little bit over the top. His stabs a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. In comes ruin there. So I think that's what we're meant to be reading from this, if we get this extract here, or we're referring to this at any point. This leads into his rhetorical question: who could refrain that had a heart to love? Almost a desperate plea to everybody else. Wouldn't you have done the same thing? And it's at this point Lady Macbeth can't, and fakes fainting, take the attention off him. So we see once again Lady Macbeth, even though she doesn't have much of a role within this, Lady Macbeth taking the initiative. We have seen one small thing with her early in the scene when she said, "What, in our house?" when hearing about Duncan being murdered, to which Banquo seemed a bit taken aback and said, "Well, it's too cruel anywhere. It doesn't matter where it was." So maybe she hasn't been perfect in her wearing her false face, but certainly here she manages to push away the. Now, I think, therefore, we can think about why Macduff reacts, what that leads to, like we're suggesting there, the impact that Macbeth's overreaction would have on other people at this point, and the contribution Lady Macbeth makes. Right, that takes the key moment of this scene. And I've gone to Malcolm and Donalbain. Now, there's two moments when they come in. The first is when they basically discuss why aren't, Malcolm, I think, suggested, why aren't we speaking up at this moment? And Donalbain points out there's nothing to be gained here. We're in a difficult situation. So once they've all decided they're going to meet together, Malcolm and Donalbain to one side have a chance to discuss it. And overall, what they're doing, of course, is deciding to run. Now, they are well aware, I am sure here, and you can see it's suggested, they're well aware that this will lead to them being blamed. This will lead to problems in the short term. But what they're thinking about is the long-term consequences. Where's your ambition if you're dead? Nowhere. So it starts with the observation, and again, I'm always considering that Malcolm is very political, very observant, that there's no point hanging around with the others because they will not see who is to blame. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. If he's false in the first place, it's easier for him to show an unfelt sorrow. Now, of course, we're going back to the false face, false heart idea. The innocent flower and the serpent. This image that comes over and over again about the front covering the truth inside. Malcolm understands that and gets that straight away. Donalbain, who of course is now speaking his final words of the play, because he will disappear to Ireland and will never return, uses this wonderful image here to explain the issue. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. He takes that idea that Malcolm's gone a little bit further. The beautiful image that friendliness is actually dangerous. They cannot trust anybody. It's a good phrase to be able to use, and of course it brings in daggers as well, which have come through out here. They're quite right as well. To the final image here, Malcolm, the murderous shaft that shotteth not yet lighted, our safest way is to avoid the aim, using the image of a bow and arrow. The murderous shaft, the bow here, the bit where you light the arrow, put the arrow on, has not yet lighted. The arrow's not quite on it. So our safest thing to do is to get out of the way of the aim before it gets there. Now, they are completely right. Of course, Macbeth would have gone for them next, especially as him being the heir. So he's quite right at this point. Whether he suspects Macbeth or not is never made clear. But the point here is that he chooses to go for safety. It's a different kind of masculinity to many of the others, rather than front up to everything. Very different, for example, from Macbeth at the end of the play. And this image does kind of show, again, because bow and arrows, you can't avoid a bow and arrow, right? Unless you can get out of the way of the aim. It's not fighting face to face with swords. This is something that's going to come at you without you seeing, fast, and take you out. So it's a very effective image. So the key here is, although Donalbain's there as well, is the picture that we're getting of Malcolm particularly. And then we've got this idea, is there suspicion general, or is it specifically on Macbeth? Does the daggers in men's smiles refer to the fact that the people, the near in blood, the nearer bloody as well, um, could also refer to the idea that somebody who's near to them in blood is actually nearer in their bloodiness. And of course, Macbeth is related to them as he's Duncan's kinsman. So, to look at the big ideas of this scene overall, first of all, let's think about the two characters at the centre. Macbeth's character is an awkward one to discuss here, but I think what we really need to look at is this idea of him attempting to wear a false face. We saw at the end of the previous scene that he was completely overwhelmed by what happened. His last line in it was basically wishing that Duncan was still awake. Is this now overcoming him so much that he is unable to function properly in this scene? I mean, obviously, one of the things he's got to do is look like a potential leader in this situation. Does he? Now, Lady Macbeth's influence is very small in this scene. However, what we can consider is how it fits in with previous scenes. How is she managing the situation? What role does she generally take in doing so? With the supernatural, again, we've got to think how much influence, or what, if any, are supernatural forces having in this scene. Before we go back to ambition and loyalty, which is an interesting one because it involves several people, and we didn't look at Banquo here and his extras, but there is, of course, the moment in the scene in which Banquo claims or proclaims, having taken steps to basically organise everybody and show that, you know, he's got kingly qualities, proclaims that he is going to stand against the murder of Duncan, and his loyalty remains with Duncan and what he stood for. Now, that might sound like an obvious thing to say from our modern perspective, but of course it wouldn't be here, would it? I mean, Duncan's dead. His influence has gone now from this particular moment. Clearly, the most powerful person is whoever killed him, and they don't know who that is at this point, although I think Banquo quite probably suspects Macbeth, and maybe one of the reasons he says it. But by standing up against him, he shows the extent of his loyalty, even though potentially he stands to benefit from it. And then, of course, we got Malcolm's ambitions. The fact that, as we just discussed, Malcolm makes decisions that affect and destroy his short-term ambitions. You know, he is the heir. He should now take over. But he realises the danger, decides to take decisive steps. And, of course, as we see in the long term, that works very well for him. So if we think about this in terms of the rest of the play, do we see a change Macbeth after this? The next time we see him, he's king, and he is dealing with the Banquo problem that he sees as a problem anyway. Do we ever see him as weak and vulnerable again as this? Well worth considering. This could be a turning point in some cases for him. However, looking at Lady Macbeth's character, that also is another potential role change. The next time we see her, we see her briefly in Act 3, Scene 1 with when they meet Banquo, but she doesn't really say anything or have any real effect on it. It's mostly in the scene after that, Act 3, Scene 2, when she has her discussion with Macbeth about what he's going to do with Banquo. And although she's trying to fulfil the same role of refocusing him, taking him forward, controlling and making sure he goes down the right lines, he's just totally really ignoring her. So is this the last time she has any influence? And if so, why? And maybe that attaches to the supernatural. What role do they take from this point on? Is this why we see Macbeth removed from the weak and vulnerable person he is, because of the influence of the supernatural at this point? Or is their change in focus now going to come on destroying Macbeth? And then with ambition and loyalty, and we talked about Banquo, Malcolm, there's also, of course, Macbeth in there. He is going to achieve his ambitions through the events of this scene, and he's managed to avoid anyone immediately accusing him, and he will be declared king at the end. However, has he done himself fatal harm here? We saw concerns that, you know, Macduff suspects him straight away. There is evidence that Banquo has suspicions about him, and possibly even that Malcolm and Donalbain do. So even though he's going to achieve his ambitions, is his behaviour here actually destroying his chance of it lasting.